All right, welcome to the recording of Invention Convention Americas 2023, presented by Raytheon Technologies Judge Training. We're going to go ahead and get started here. All right, as noted, this is Judge Training for the Americas competition this summer. We'll go through a couple introductions. First, my name is Mitch Huffnagel. I'm the manager of Invention Convention Worldwide Programming and Education here at the Henry Ford. Typically, that means I do plenty with educators or affiliates across the United States or across the world, but I also help lead judging for a handful of competitions annually. I'm joined today by one of my colleagues, Pat Hurley. Pat, you mind introducing yourself?
I do not. Hello, I'm Pat Hurley. I'm the manager of InHub Marketing, so I'm in charge of all the marketing for all of our educational products here at the Henry Ford. One of my other duties is being in charge of all our digital platforms, so I will be talking later in this presentation about our judging platform.
Thanks, Pat. Oh, there we go. So what is Invention Convention Worldwide? In case you don't know, we see ourselves as the go-to global community for firsthand experiences that ignite the spark of innovation, invention, and entrepreneurship in young people. You can find more at this link below, inhub.thehenryford.org/ICW/home. If that's too much to remember, you can always search Invention Convention Worldwide and poke around until you find us. Now, I promise I won't read directly from every slide in this presentation, but I do want to level set with our vision and our mission, because that's really core to everything that we do, including the judging with the students. So our vision. We envision a world in which all young learners have access to innovation, invention, and entrepreneurial learning to gain the confidence and skills to control their own destiny. And our mission. We provide innovation, invention, and entrepreneurial learning to instill problem identification, problem solving, entrepreneurship, and creativity skills for life. Our purpose is to inspire young people to become innovators, inventors, and entrepreneurs over the course of their K through 12 plus careers. Now, what is Americas? Americas is the latest iteration of our international competition. The past few years, we have hosted a globals competition. This year, we're focusing on Americas, with students coming to us from national competitions in either the United States or Mexico. The whole thing is powered by the Henry Ford's Invention Convention Worldwide program, which is why I spent a little bit of time talking about that. We're very excited to have another international competition this summer. Our international affiliates at this time include Didactron in Mexico and the Henry Ford in the United States. Now, our training today is an overview. We're going to go through a welcome and purpose. We're going to talk about judging and feedback tips and different strategies you can use there. We'll walk through the different judging roles and expectations. We'll discuss the rubric, and we'll actually walk through each of the individual rubric dimensions. Pat will come through and we'll discuss the scoring process and ZFAIRs, and then we'll finish off with a couple of reminders. So our welcome and purpose. Welcome, and thank you for serving as an Invention Convention judge. Over 150 K through 12 plus students will be competing after succeeding in their national competitions. As a judge, you hold the prestigious honor of helping us to fulfill our mission, again, to inspire, encourage, and recognize students for their own original ideas. More than any other individual item, we want to inspire and grow creative problem solvers in a constructive environment. So please keep that in mind as your role as an authority figure for these students as they're going through this competition. Now, a few things to keep in mind. You will be judging inventors, possibly from a variety of grades, although we'll do our best to keep that into a narrow grade band. You will have students from different backgrounds, different cultures, and nationalities, potentially as well. We ask that you do not compare inventors, but that you judge every submission individually. And what we mean by that is that we're hoping that you help us as a judge, that as you're doing that, you look at the process the students have gone through rather than the end result. And that will help you focus on the individual students rather than comparing them across. Now, before we go any further, thinking of the role that judges have for students, we have this quote from Charles Brouwer here. As a reminder that your comments to the students will have a deep impact. A new idea is delicate. It can be killed by a sneer or a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a quip. and worried to death by a frown on the right man's brow. And that leads into our general tips for giving feedback to the students. We ask that you listen intently to the different presentations, even jotting down notes related to the rubric, things that you think that are maybe ambiguous, you might want to ask later. We ask that when you provide feedback, and this of course will be in the live Q&A session, in addition to written feedback, that you keep in mind the hamburger method or the sandwich method. We're asked that you use 2 compliments to sandwich around a suggestion or a piece of critical feedback in the middle. Now, what might this look like? Hey, Pat, thank you for presenting to us today. Before we had live Q&A today and I have the opportunity to talk to you virtually, I really enjoyed your video presentation. I thought that you were thoughtful. I thought that your delivery was charismatic and very detailed. Great job. Now, one thing I think you could take another look at, I didn't hear a whole lot of focus on market research when you were delivering your presentation or market potential. As you go through this in the future, maybe that's something you could look at delving into deeper. And then finish with another compliment. Your display board is full of great color and it was done very neatly. I think that reflects very well on you. Thank you for sharing your time with us and keep inventing. So that's just an example, and it will be easier to come up with examples as you have specific students in front of you. I kept that very broad in general, but that hamburger method is just that simple. Lead off with a compliment, provide some critical feedback, and then finish off with another compliment. The goal here is to keep everything positive for the students. We want to build them up rather than tear them down. So please keep this hamburger method in mind. In addition to that, written comments that you are able to provide in Z-Fairs will be shared with students, but your scores will not. So the feedback that you give to them in some ways can be the most impactful thing they can use to get better. And of course, that's in addition to the verbal feedback you can offer to students who take part in the live question and answer period, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So rubric and rules. For our international competition, we actually do employ 2 rubrics. One is for students in grades 3 through 12 plus. That is maybe a pretty typical rubric you might see across Invention Convention, although it has gone through a couple changes over the past few years. The K through 2 projects, their rubric is the exact same. However, they do not participate in live Q&A. The logistics of getting students that young to connect to Zoom and to present to judges, sometimes across time zones or even across the world, that's something that we're not going to put our K through 2 students through. We can evaluate them just as well from the actual rubric that we're using for everybody else. So the only difference that you'll see here between these 2 different rubrics is the fact that at the very last dimension there, live Q&A, that only applies to students in grades 3 through 12 plus. We'll go deeper into that rubric as we go through the walkthrough here in a few slides, but right now we're going to jump into the judge expectations and the timeline for judges as well. So the video that Pat and I are recording today, we're hoping that you can take a look at this sometime between July 5th and July 21st. Ideally, you're able to take a look at this before either July 11th or 12th, and then you can attend one of the judge review conversation sessions. That's a session, almost think of it like office hours at a university. We're asking that any judges, in fact, all judges, if possible, turn up to one of these 2 sessions and ask questions. That'll be the best way for you to learn anything that's unclear from this video, though we'll do our very best to provide something that is totally comprehensive. Now, after those judge review conversations, the next big judging item is actually video presentation judging. So that's when judges will evaluate all the aspects of that rubric, which I just showed on screen and which we'll talk about a little bit more besides live question and answer. So that's where judges will asynchronously evaluate up to 6 projects. And we believe that will take up to about 90 minutes. Each individual video that you're viewing will be about 4 to 6 minutes long at most. And so we figure that'll take you 90 minutes at most to get through evaluating those 6 projects. Now, this video presentation period that takes place between July 24th and July 28th. So that's a Monday through a Friday. Now, after video presentation judging, we do have live Q&A. Now that is when individual students and judges, I should say, students who worked all in one project. So the same ones that you evaluated during the video presentation judging, that group of students or that individual student will join a Zoom call. We will have moderators on there. If students do not speak English, we will have translators on that call as well. And we will have the 3 judges for the group. That will take place, and that will be a synchronous interaction taking place. And there will be a 3-hour time slot. So that's basically a half hour for the first project, a half hour for the second project, as well as the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th. So that's a total of 3 hours, and that will take place between 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on a couple of different sessions. So as an individual judge, you will either have a 3-hour session, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on July 31st, or you will have one on August 1st, or you will have one on August 2nd, but only one of those 3-hour sessions. Now, going a little bit deeper into the video judging, and then of course we'll return to live Q&A. So video presentation judging will begin on July 24th. If you have not already, please make sure that you confirm your ZFairs access. When judging opens, you will receive a reminder email from ZFairs prompted from our team. We ask that you complete judging all 6 of your submissions by July 28th. Now, attire, what to wear for this, it's totally your choice. Feel free to be totally comfortable because it's done asynchronously and not with the students. Materials that you'll need some kind of computer or maybe a phone to access ZFairs itself. And then things that are optional but not required. But some people find it helpful to have a rubric printed out for them, maybe some note paper and pens. But the rubric will be inside of ZFairs itself too. So as you're viewing the videos, that will be right handy in the same system. Now, the timing of this, we ask that you're prepared to spend at least 10 to 15 minutes per inventor submission. You don't have to judge them all in one day. You can take breaks or relax in between and refresh. You could even judge across the whole week if you wanted to. 1 or 2 per day would be just fine, as long as you get all 6 done between July 24th and July 28th. Then we will have live Q&A. So live Q&A will begin on July 31st and then on August 2nd. Each judge will only be paired for a 3-hour time slot on one of those 3 days. The live Q&A will be with the same inventors and inventions that you had in video judging. This year, we are going to use Zoom to host these interactions, and Zoom meetings will arrive in your inbox sometime in mid-July. Hopefully sometime about July 18th or 19th is what we're aiming for there to get that to you. Now, the attire, we ask for this, that you're in some kind of semi-casual or business attire, and everything is very age appropriate for the students. Now, again, you'll be assigned to 1 3-hour judging time slot based on your registration. So what you register for, hopefully we'll be able to get you into that one, but we do ask that you register and let us know any of those 3-hour sessions that you can make. That would be 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on July 31st, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time, August 1st, or 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time, August 2nd. That 3-hour time slot, again, it breaks into 6 half-hour slots. So for your individual projects, they'll kind of be stacked there in these little repeating half-hour intervals. And so when you do get Zoom invites, you will get actually 6 calendar invitations, all one after the other. So that works out for the students and you guys to be paired, but then to no individual student groups would maybe overlap in the same Zoom room. That won't be possible. Now, continuing with live Q&A, a run of show. Now, what that might look like. There will be 10 minutes of Q&A with each team. I know we have a 30-minute time slot, but that's only going to be 10 minutes with the individual students. So I made up at 1 o'clock, but say it was 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, the moderator will log into the room. The students and the judges will all log in as well, and a translator if applicable. A moderator will help everybody get situated. At about 1:05 or when situated, that's when the 10-minute Q&A will begin. After those 10 minutes, which is typically about 1:15 or so, that's when Q&A will end. Students will exit the room. Moderator will either exit the room or potentially stick around to ensure that the Zoom room actually stays open. Judges will have time to deliberate together and to go back into Z-Fairs and edit their scores, not just from the live Q&A round, but also from the video presentation round as well. In the event that students, through their live Q&A, impact the score that you want to give them for the previous round. Then at the top of the hour, 1:30, or the top of the half hour, I should say, so call this 7 o'clock, 7:15 Q&A closes. About 7:30 is when the cycle would begin again. An important note here is that teams who need translators to work with them to translate into English will have 15 minutes for Q&A, and everything else will remain the same. So in the example that we started with, say a team needs translators, everybody logs in at about 7. At about 7:05, Q&A will kick off, and then at about 7:20, Q&A will wrap up. 7:30, the room will close, and the next one will begin. And of course, that cycle will repeat at 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, and all Eastern time. So rubric walkthrough here. The rubric is composed of 13 dimensions that have been crafted to evaluate 3 important invention categories: invention process, invention impact, and inventor communication. Now, 45 points are allocated to the invention process, and about 35 or 25 points, depending on if there's 10 points for Q&A for our 3 through 12 plus projects, or no 10 points for our K through 2 projects. The very bulk of the score actually follows the individual dimensions in the steps of the invention process that the students have learned in their classrooms or as part of this program. They follow a 7-step process. Their first step is identifying a problem and understanding the solution. Those 2 steps of the process combined are the very first dimension of the rubric here. The third step is ideating. There's 10 points. The 4th and 5th steps are designing and building, another 10 points. And the 6th step is testing and refining. Now, the 7th step is actually communication. So if we jump down and look at inventor communication, there are 5 points allocated for the logbook, 5 points for the display board, 5 points for the prototype, 10 for the video presentation, and then 10 for live Q&A, which again is only for the 3 through 12 plus students, which is why there's a little discrepancy in the scoring here between the 2 sides. Those are all typically physical materials the students will use to help them communicate in one way or another. And we'll dive more into these dimensions individually over the next few slides. 25 points are allocated to invention impact, 5 points for market potential, 5 points for value proposition, 5 points for social value, and 10 points for originality. That brings a total of 105 points for projects in grades 3 through 12, or 95 points for students in grades K through 2. We will use a percentage of total points to compare those students when we get to awards allocation, but that's something for our team internally, not as relevant for the judges, but just so you guys know, that's how it works. Now we're going to go through and talk about each of these individual rubric dimensions. We're going to start with identifying and understanding, which is worth 15 points, actually the largest individual rubric dimension of the entire rubric. So the goal here for students, the identifying stage is where an inventor seeks or finds a problem that they want to solve. Oftentimes they'll focus on how they uncovered this problem. Usually students will identify a problem that they experience in their own lives, or that loved ones or classmates or somebody that they see almost daily experiences in their lives around them. Students will also identify problems that maybe impact the world at large, things like global warming or cleaning up the oceans, but oftentimes they actually find out about that through their everyday lives, maybe watching the news or overhearing a report or something at home or at school or in the car. Now, understanding refers to the research that students will do. And that typically follows 2 pathways. Students will understand and do some research to understand who else is impacted by their identified problem. They will also do some research to understand why are current solutions that are out there in the market not good enough. Now, there's an example written here of a well-defined problem. About 17,000 kids ages 18 and under experience an infection from their IV when hospitalized. This costs insurance companies a certain amount of dollars, and kids are hospitalized a certain amount of days longer than anticipated. That's a really specific problem with some good research behind it. Oftentimes when we are looking at research, we are hoping that students have researched multiple sources to understand the problem, including but not limited to Google or their country's patent and trademark office, subject matter experts visiting stores, looking at industry news, etc. Those are examples maybe of really high scoring projects. An example that I always think of when I think of identifying and understanding, there was a student who identified that she had the problem with hiccups. They were painful for her and she wanted hiccups to go away, which I'm sure is very relatable. While she was doing her research, she, in her understanding for this step of the invention process, she found out that there's another distinct population of humans who had the same problem that she had identified. And that was actually chemotherapy patients. As part of their therapy, going through chemo treatment, people can actually develop really painful hiccups. And so she ended up tweaking the direction of her invention to really incorporate that group as a potential customer for her invention. Now, rubric walkthrough ideating. The goal for students with the ideating step, that's the brainstorming or imagination step, where students will come up with their own original ideas and develop their ideas into specific requirements to determine the likelihood of success. A lot of times students want to jump right to this stage. They have an idea, they want to build it, they're ready to go. But the very best ideating comes from really great identifying and understanding. We hope that students, maybe a really great example, 10 out of 10 student explains that they identified 2+ ideas and explains the elimination process for how they could select those ideas. And we do also want to hear their requirements to determine the likelihood of success, maybe different metrics. An example of that, there was a group of students at US Nationals a few years ago. Their favorite sport was lacrosse, and they were trying to solve or impact the problem of students getting concussions while playing the sport. So they actually had a certain amount of force, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but a certain amount of force that they wanted to stay under with their newly designed helmets in order to meet their metric for success for this invention. And so they did a lot of trial, they did a lot of great identifying, understanding, ideating, building, designing, and testing in order to eventually come up with some prototypes that could keep the force of impact from the lacrosse under a certain threshold to diminish the effects of concussions for students. So that was another great example of students who had really specific requirements for success. Now, 10 points is also allocated for designing and for building the 4th and 5th steps, respectively, of the invention process, which the students have been using in their classrooms or however they're accessing this program. Designing an invention or a prototype is typically done through a variety of ways. That might be pen and paper. It might be maybe using some graph paper or something like that. Maybe they have online software like CAD design or something like that. Those are all great designs, but you should see designs somewhere. Maybe they've attached as a photo, maybe they hold up their design, maybe it's in their logbook, maybe it's on their display board. If you want information on that design, I would prompt the students during Q&A if you don't hear as much as you'd like in the earlier steps. In the video presentation. Now, building in some ways goes hand in hand with designing. How are these two things different? Designing is really the drawing out, labeling of components, how different things might fit into each other for a cohesive prototype. Building refers to both what the students will actually do to construct their prototype, but more so it will have to do with the types of materials they consider using for their prototype. Now, many students, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the prototype dimension itself, they might have cardboard or duct tape as part of their prototype, but they should be able to tell you what that cardboard represents. Maybe it represents wood, or maybe it represents some kind of manufactured plastic, maybe it represents carbon fiber, for all I know. But you want to listen to that in order to really deliver and evaluate the scores for designing and building. Now, testing and refining, another 10 points. The key to this step is really iterations, improvements, and perseverance. The best inventors know that their first attempt is often not the best, so they want to test it and refine it. Now, testing and refining can look a little bit different for every inventor. Sometimes testing it out with potential end users is a great way to do it, or having classmates tested, especially in the case of our younger students. The image that accompanies this, there's a young student who wanted to promote plant growth, and she wanted to try this out by inserting some kind of vibrating device into the soil of these different pots and having it vibrate at different frequencies. You can tell here in the photo that the pot that is furthest from us within this photo, there's not very much growing out of it. But the one closest to us, you can see it's growing and overflowing the pot itself. That's a really great example of a student going through and testing and having different iterations of their invention to determine which one worked best. This is also a good point for us to pause and to consider that the expectations for any student here, they are age adjusted. You might not expect testing and refining to look the same for a kindergartner as you might for a 12th grader, for example. So it's worthwhile considering that whatever you're doing or whatever you're evaluating here might look a little bit different. For a third grader, having testing and refining, having their 20 to 30 classmates try something out, that can be really great. For a 12th grader, what we might expect is more stress testing or testing with actual potential end users or getting feedback from an expert out in the field. And that is the same for all the different rubric dimensions. They are age adjusted. We will do our best to have judges evaluate students who are all in the same grade bands, because that way it'll be easier for individual judges to evaluate those projects, knowing that they can compare them fairly. Now, our next piece here in the first part of invention impact, or first dimension of invention impact, is market potential, and that's worth 5 points. Now, market potential assesses the scope and the likelihood of an invention gaining users. How large or viable is the potential market, and what's the research they've done to determine that? To what extent was the market appropriately researched and scoped? Now, the best answers will include some kind of blend of quantitative and even qualitative understanding of the market. A really great example, maybe there's an invention that removes carbon dioxide from the air or the environment, and maybe these students have researched the number of organizations that are to use similar technology to approximate the number of early adopters. That's a great way. For younger students, I talked about the age adjusted. For a third grade student, maybe they have a classroom survey of who might use their device. That's really great market potential research for students in lower grades. Now, our next piece here is value proposition. The goal of value proposition, we want to hear students clearly summarize why a consumer or a user should buy or use their invention. The statement might convince a potential or a future consumer that their particular product or service is better or more useful or solves the problem in a better way than what else is out there in the market. So in some ways, this is looking for what makes this uniquely beneficial. The best answers will provide age-appropriate descriptions and understanding of the potential users out there in the marketplace and the benefits that could go to those users by using their individual device. Now, the next piece here is social value, which includes environmental impact. The goal of this, some students, their inventions might directly address social value or environmental impact. Not all do, but we do expect that all students will take this into consideration when they're going through the invention process. There was a student years ago who had some kind of, in their invention involved ice cream. And I can't remember all the ins and the outs of it. Maybe there were some recycled components, or maybe it was dairy free or something. But what I do really remember actually is that the packaging that they designed for their invention, it was all made from recycled materials. And that was their plan for moving forward as part of their business model, was to actually use recycled materials as part of the packaging in an effort to decrease the negative externalities created or decrease their negative externalities on environmental impact. So that's another really great way for students to earn points here. The student in the young image provided, she came up with something called the bully band. The bully band was a way for students to discreetly signal to their teacher through a little bracelet how they were feeling at school that day, if they were feeling down, if they were feeling happy, maybe they were feeling bullied in a worst case scenario. And that's maybe a good example of how an invention can have positive social value. Our next piece here is originality, and this is worth 10 points. Now, we do expect that our students come up with inventions that are unique, novel, and creative, in that they should be distinguishable from prior inventions or those of their peers or things that exist out in the marketplace. A really great example of this is when an invention is beyond incremental and it's something the judges had not considered before or seen. We know that this one can be a little bit hard to evaluate, but we ask that you do your best job to try to understand, how original this individual invention is. And that can be something for Q&A too, in case you have some questions for the students to try to determine the exact score for this. Our next piece here is part of inventor communication, as are all the remaining rubric dimensions. This one is the logbook and is worth 5 points. The logbook, the purpose of it is really to document everything that goes into a student's project. They should start their invention log, and this might come in a couple of names. It's worth mentioning that: logbook, invention log, invention journal, inventor's journal. All those things are the logbook. And of course, it's a documentation of their journey from the very beginning to the very end. In some logbooks, I've even seen students, the presentation that they're delivering to me, I'm seeing it written out in their logbook because they were practicing it in there too. It's really key that logbooks include all the different aspects of invention process: problem identification, ideation, research, solution testing, and redesigning, all the different dimensions we've discussed here. Now, the best logbooks will typically contain some research indicating that the young inventor is exceptionally knowledgeable about their problem and understands the issue thoroughly. We're hopeful that it will include some sources for the research that they've done. Oftentimes you'll see the designs or the early designs in their logbook, especially if they don't happen to be on their display board as well. And we want to see logbooks that are organized, effective, and complete. Now, the display board, which is worth 5 points. So the goal of the display board, a couple of questions here. Does it have strong visual appeal? Is the display eye-catching with color, pictures, graphs, and variety? For any grammar, spelling, and punctuation, is it done correctly? And if handwritten, neatly done? Does the display communicate significant aspects of that invention process? Again, all those steps we talked about that are in the rubric. Are there unique aspects to the display, such as its shape? And the best one we have of that, there's a student here who came up with a pretty unique shape for his invention display board. And you might not be able to tell this, maybe it's a little blurry for you, but that picture that's more in the background, that's a student came up with something called the porta potty survival kit. That student, their invention had something to do with porta potties, and they actually molded their display board, folded it, and shrunk it a little bit to actually look like a porta potty. So that's maybe a really great example of how students can let their creativity show here. Now, our next piece is the prototype or the model, and you see something highlighted here that is not by mistake, that's intentional, so I make sure to call it out. Now, the goal of the prototype is really the physical manifestation of the student's invention. It does not need to be operational in order for it to score all points. No prototypes need to be fully operational. Rather, this is a communication device that should show the significant aspects of how the invention would work were it fully operational. Outside assistance and collaboration is totally acceptable as long as the students document the outside help. We never encourage students to do anything that they cannot safely do themselves. So there's always a couple of students, maybe in lower grades, who called a third grader again. A third grader, we're not expecting that they can use a drill by themselves. So getting help from an adult is awesome. What we do expect is for those third graders to credit adults who help them along the way, and look out for that in their video presentation or ask about it in live Q&A if you don't spot it. Really great examples of prototypes. There can be something that's working, like an apparatus made from real smashed bananas hooked to wires that generate electrical output that has been tested and modified in order to really maximize that output. That's a great working prototype. Very cool. Another equally great prototype is something like a model. Maybe there's a detailed environmental model that shows how an invention might help endangered turtle hatchlings, sea turtles, that is, find their way back home to the ocean, rather than getting distracted by local lights or something like that. So maybe a metal tray with some sand on one half, some glossy paper representing water on the other, maybe some UV lights around the perimeter to show how maybe an invention can help little minifigure turtles make their way into the ocean. It's a great prototype and it doesn't work, and that's okay too. We just want to look out for how the prototypes fulfill the job of communicating the significant aspects of the invention. Now here is the video presentation, so 10 points. The goal of the video presentation is really so that judges are able to fully score the rest of the rubric. So you're going to want to hear all the different individual rubric dimensions we've discussed thus far. The invention process elements that are outlined as part of this rubric, identifying and understanding, ideating, designing and building, as well as testing and refining. We expect that students will use or reference all the logbook, display board, and prototype in their video. And of course, we want to hear an explanation of the origination of the idea so that we can assess the originality. In addition to the other significant rubric aspects of inventor impact: social value, value proposition, and market potential. Now there are maybe a couple of delineated rules for students in different grades. For students in grades K through 3, parents may prompt students. In students in grades, I want to say 3 through 5, they could even use note cards rather than prompting. For students 5th and up, though, we are expecting that they are able to get through this without prompting or note cards. Now, the video presentation itself may be up to 6 minutes. I wouldn't necessarily penalize students if they're on the short end. If they're 4 or under, that's okay. But anything past 6, judges actually are not required to listen to. And in fact, our recommendation is once students get to 6 minutes that you turn the video off and you evaluate the project from the information you have thus far. Now, what helps video presentations maybe stand out from others is not only the information that's conveyed, but how it's conveyed. Are the students clear and concise with minimal stammering or superfluous words? Do they use correct grammar? Do they use enthusiasm, passion, inflection, and appropriate body language? Look out for that as differentiators between really great video presentations from really good video presentations. Our next piece here, in the last individual dimension of the rubric, is the live Q&A, and that's worth 10 points. Now, all the other parts of the invention, or the individual rubric dimensions we just talked through, you'll be able to evaluate those from the video presentation during that video presentation window of July 24th to July 28th. Now, live Q&A, that's the part that will happen in a 3-hour segment on one of the evenings of July 31st, August 1st, or August 2nd from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. When you're scoring, when the students go through live Q&A, we do ask you to actually score on a scale of 10 their live Q&A performance. But we do also give you the ability to go back into ZFairs and to edit the scores from the previous round in case you find out something that makes you want to score a student higher or even lower based on the Q&A that you just went through. The goal of this and why we do it for our international virtual competition is to replicate our in-person competitions. When students are in person, they'll typically have about 5 minutes to present to judges and about 5 minutes for question and answer. We've added that back in a virtual format in order to give judges the opportunity to ask students clarifying questions directly. And it's also a great opportunity for your feedback for students too, in addition to the written feedback that you can leave in ZFairs. So yeah, typically that'll happen in judge circles, but this is our best way to replace that at the global level. Now, when evaluating live Q&A, we want to pay attention to how do they handle those live questions? Are they composed? And do they use the question in their answer back? So a great example is a student who's able to answer all questions, which reveals a depth of knowledge that proves they were part of the invention team. Student shares more specific information than they did in the video when asked for it. And students are able to calmly and succinctly answer all the questions with a high level of relevance to the question asked. Students repeat the question back in their answer to ensure that they are answering effectively. Now, at this point, I'm actually going to hop off of screen share. I'm going to turn this over to Pat Hurley. We've discussed all the aspects of the scoring rubric. Pat's going to jump in here and walk us through an example of how to score this in the ZFAIR system. So Pat, over to you.
Thanks, Mitch. Just hit the screen share. Mitch, are you seeing my screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, awesome. So I am going to show you an example in a different contest than the one we're talking about here, Americas. This is from our Independent Inventor Program that we held prior to U.S. Nationals this year. We haven't got all our students imported into the Globals event yet or registered, so I have nothing to show you there right now, but the experience will be the same as in that instance of ZFAIRs as it is here. So I'm logged in as one of our judges for the Independent Inventor Program. When it's time to start judging, you'll just log into your account. In this case, I'm logged into one of our judges named Nisa, and you'll click on the Go to Online Judging button, which I've already clicked here. And you will be presented something that looks just like this. I will tell you the difference is going to be, as Mitch mentioned, we have an online round where you're going to review the projects online, then we have the live Q&A. So you'll actually see everything twice. You'll see the online judging round like this, and below it, you'll see the live Q&A round with the same project listed. So when you're doing the first segment of judging, the online judging, you just go through and do it here. And then when you're doing the Zoom judging with the students later on, you'll go to the next level down and see the same projects. And then in order to do judging, excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. Simply click on a project and you'll see the ones that you've been assigned only. It will open up in ZFAIRs, and for the online judging, you'll be able to review all of the project materials that have been submitted by the student. You'll see their description. You can click through and look at their logbook, which will open up in a tab here. And I'm going to close that quickly. You can look at their display board slide that they're going to do a picture of. And then you can watch their pitch video here, which will load up. If you have any troubles with any of these things, if you're trying to open them up, there's always a little link on the bottom to open a new tab. So if you're having problems with pop-ups being blocked or something like that, you can click on that link and it'll open in a new tab so you can watch the video. Once you've reviewed all the materials and watched the video, looked at the logbook, and then we'll scroll down, we'll see pictures, and finally we'll see some questions that they have been asked to answer for the judges. So you'll see the questions and their answers to them. You'll then go down and see the rubric that Mitch went through. This rubric is similar, maybe not entirely identical to the rubric you'll see, but it's very, very close. So for the online judging, you'll see this full rubric with a bunch of questions. And then for the Q&A, you'll see a rubric with just one element in it because we're only scoring the live Q&A in that round. So you'll, instead of seeing 10 or 12, you'll see one. And then to go through, you're just simply going to click on the score for each of the different rubric elements. You can see the description of it here, and you'll have a copy of the rubric as well. And once you've gone through and done your scores, and I'm just going through randomly here and clicking on scores, and I get to the end and I've done all my scores. If you want to leave any comments for the students, we will share those with them. And as Mitch mentioned earlier, the hamburger model of writing a comment, you could do that. And then you click the submit score and close button, and it'll ask you to confirm that you're done, and you'll say yes. And you'll go back and you'll see this is now turned gray instead of white, and you'll see your score. I will mention, if you count up the number of points that are available, the number you see here will be different. This is a percentage of the total points available in that round and not a count of points. So keep that in mind. You'll just go through the rest of them and do the same thing until you finish that round. If, as you're going through, you decide that you want to change a score, maybe you thought you judged more or less harshly than you should have based upon further experience with other students' projects, you can simply click on it and go back in, change the score, and then go back down and click save and submit score and close, and do the same thing. And you'll see that we now have a new score here. And that's all you have to do. And it should be super easy. We will send you an email prior to the judging round with a quick login code to help you get in. And if you have any questions, you could just email us at icw@thehenryford.org and we'll help you out. Back to you, Mitch.
Awesome. Thanks for that description, Pat. I'm going to screen share my very last slide here. Pat, are you seeing it?
Not yet.
Yeah, that's weird. Let me try that one more time. There we go.
There we go.
All right. So very last, thank you. Thank you so much for volunteering as a judge for the Invention Convention Americas 2023 presented by Raytheon Technologies event. You can tell I need to edit this slide from last year, so that's my apologies there. Thank you for being a judge for us this summer. Now, please don't forget to attend one of our 2 judge review conversations on either July 11th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time or July 12th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for helping to inspire, encourage, and recognize students for their hard work and their own individual ideas. If you have any questions, please email the appropriate contact. If you're a United States judge, the best one for you to reach out to is icw@thehenryford.org. If you are a judge coming to us from Mexico, we recommend reaching out first to an info@mexicoinventa.org, but you could also reach out to our team at icw@thehenryford.org as well. So thank you, everybody, for spending your time with us. We're really excited, and I know you're going to have a great time. Thanks.